Paraguay's trying to extricate its forces from this area while still maintaining a line here. And it's fairly easy because of the weather. So Bolivia could have, gone all out assault if they wanted, but they chose not to because a successful assault would mean that they're out of supply and probably lose some units, quite a few units. It would break their entire supply chain to start launching attacks. They were able to launch a couple of things though. Lanza marched down here, took Arca, and Bilbao launched an attack out of here, which actually I think would have cut this guy out of supply. This guy's going to be out of supply, and he's also weak. He's a cav unit, so he's only 3 strength points, but he's doubled their so he's 6 because he doesn't have any matching forces. I couldn't get anything down there. This guy actually, no, he was in supply, 2, 4, 6. And I was actually able to supply almost everything by using the coastal road. I only used a handful of depots. I don't know if it was 3. I think I had 1 left over. Oops. I got a question here whether I want a fort there or we'll go with the fort. I'm thinking about clearing, but it's such a pain in the ass to clear terrain that you can only do it in terrain that you're in, and it's very difficult to justify spending an effort on that when you don't have yourself fortified along the line. But no pushes down here. Yeah, Bilbao got thrown back, repulsed from this fortification, but he did destroy a 1 strength point unit. And that matters. Losses that the Bolivians take almost don't matter, although they... Remember, if you lose something completely, there's a victory point penalty. Losing things completely doesn't matter in terms of their replacement rate because they're out of chits here, and they've got a better supply table in terms of both supplies and in terms of replacement points. The problem they have is replacement points right now, though. They have a lot of damaged units kicking around in these stacks from the offensive, and they kind of want to build them up again before they undertake another offensive, just because Paraguay is going to take forever to get these guys back. Now, Paraguay probably should be calling up reserves pretty soon. They're able to only do it twice per game, but things are looking pretty desperate at this point. The problem really, though, has to do with mobility. I've got a bunch of troops here. These guys could have pulled back, but they can't move quickly enough. And this, there's going to be more things falling. Maybe Bolcaron's going to fall again, whatever, as the time goes by. Now, on Bolivia's side, they could move these infantry a little bit faster with trucks. If they load them up on a truck, that takes 2 movement points. Then they could go 3 hexes down the road, where the infantry can only go 2 hexes down the road. So it's kind of a pity that I'm shifting all my trucks back here. But if they're not in the line right now, they're not going to do me that good. A big mobile strike force hasn't really felt terribly valuable to me. I know the DLM column was suggesting you want to create them. I haven't felt too much of an advantage on them just because, I could shift my axis from one road to another is basically all that it really allows. It doesn't let me go through the through the brush and tangled terrain at all. It's not all that valuable for moving through clear. If anything, the trucks are probably slower than most of my infantry and such. Alright, so for February, the end of the rainy season of 34, I kind of wish there was a possibility of a variation of weather, like, I don't know. I'm not sure why, because these might be fairly standardized. It may be that you're talking maybe a week's difference, but not a whole month. It just feels like usually years are not so alike, but I know some areas the weather systems are very, very predictable. Anyway, we're ready to go into the rocking turns where everything can be done, and Bolivia is still low on supplies because they've been pushing forward fairly hard for a rainy season era. They hit here and took the fortifications here. They actually made an attack here, but withheld making the second attack. Franco is in place here, able to, now that it's good weather, 2, 4, let me see, come out of there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then he can go 1, 2, 3, 4 down to Ferna here. So this is all going to be in supply now. Now Paraguay suffered another bad turn in terms of that supply situation. Question, of course, of whether or not to hold Munoz or whether these troops are more valuable on the line. I think the troops are more valuable if I can pull them out, and movement is a lot easier at this point. These were done via reaction movement. No point in a counterattack. I couldn't concentrate that kind of force. It looks pretty bad for Paraguay, except for the fact that Bolivia has very little in the terms of supplies. So they're not going to be able to do what they did late in the year last year, which is just, huge bombardments to reduce a hex's units. They were throwing, all 4 artillery in against fortifications, knowing that in the first 2 rounds of combat they could blow away a unit each time, or reduce a unit each time, and then face less strength than appeared to be in the hex. But Paraguay's forces are stretched awfully thin. Now, they've got a lot of reinforcements coming in right now. And you know what? I still forgot to blow those 5 victory points to bring more in. I think I'm going to cheat in my favor of them because I don't think that would have affected anything. And I'm going to do 1 call up. So this would have happened before the Bolivian turn. I get 4 fresh units, and I'm just going to be channeling them up that line because that's all in supply in this upcoming turn. So these are all, their units are kind of quick, significantly faster than the Bolivian units. Those are all coming in. I'm going to need them. I was away from the table for a while, so this was kind of an interesting turn. The Paraguayans fell back, and Bolivia, I think, overextended themselves. They came charging forward, here moving forward to set up for an attack here, but here they were launching forward to try to hit Franco, bust up the Paraguayan position. Well, 2 commanders were in place to bring large, they're stacked with decent amounts of troops, and they can either cut this or maybe hit Bilbao. We'll see, the pulsing. Bilbao gets first strike. And then over here, Estic launched a counterattack against this covering force here, while the main force is hitting what's actually a fairly well-defended pile here. So I think Paraguay is going to get away with some cheap, good attacks, and then they can fall back on their own turn. It doesn't matter that they left things empty. Went very, very poorly for Bolivia. Bilbao ends up surrounded. He tried to shoot his way out this way. Not a terribly useful act anyhow. But if he's loose and not completely isolated, he suffers lesser attrition. And this line is beginning to look weak. Our commander-in-chief managed, whose name I cannot remember, managed to bust a unit away and then rout another one. So overall, that actually worked out really well for Paraguay in a way that I didn't think it would. I thought Bolivia kind of had this game in the bag in terms of they just have to slowly crush, but they got a little too aggressive. They don't have to worry about a truce or anything. The only thing about a truce that they have to worry about is the idea that, okay, if there is a truce, it might last longer. The possibility of a truce continuing is a little better than of one starting. So, I mean, it could take some turns away from them, but they should have had the game in the bag, I think. But they got a little cocky, mainly because the unit that they destroyed here was had an engineer on it and was really beginning to solidify the line. And this is the problem. They can't allow Paraguay to build up that line that's impregnable. They have to cut it somewhere, and this isn't a terrible place to do so. It opens up these rich plains. And the other thought was, okay, and if I slice them in half here, wow, they're really going to have to fall back and all kind of stuff. Well, sometimes wishful thinking gets in your way, doesn't it? All right, well, after Paraguay's turn, they formed what's actually a pretty strong line, and it cuts Bilbao off here. Now, I have no supplies. I could launch an attack in the hopes of something, except I don't think I'm going to make the 1-2, which means I can't possibly do any damage. So his force is pretty much going to starve there, and he'll get booted somewhere else. He doesn't have to pay any price for this. A little bit of victory points, but other than that, Bilbao is not going to disappear. He's not going to get killed this way, and he doesn't get sacked this way for having gotten himself caught out there. That kind of disturbs me. I can choose to try to remove him. Of course, I won't. He's my best commander. The one weakness in my line is over here, Iraz. He was attacked during the Bolivian, combat phase in the Paraguayan turn, and that was reduced. Bolivia could have bombarded the shit out of him, but they don't have the supplies. They are completely out of supplies after one bombardment and one attack. They only get one attack. I was kind of hoping to cause a retreat because this would really kind of threaten the Toledo space. But as it stands, it looks like the Paraguayan line is going to hold. How long it's going to hold for is questionable, though, because there really isn't anything defensible here. That settlement has no effect on combat whatsoever. So this part of the line can just collapse. The only good terrain is here, the brush. There are no fortifications. There's one back here in brush, but there's no fortifications here. And that's a lot of points there that could fall. Paraguay can't really afford to give up too many points right now. Bolivia's at 107. Paraguay's at 120. I've got like 13 points to give up. There's a good chance that if I gave all that up, double die rolls and everything, that would be enough to put Bolivia in the lead in the game. Of course, they're going to lose a die roll of points there. Plus, if they're in a location, which I don't think they are. Alright, well, the Bolivian turn ended with them launching an attack, setting up for an attack here, but Estic came in and prevented that from happening. And then I noticed something terrible. I've had a whole pile of forces under B. I have no idea where they actually are. His leader moved from here, but I don't know if they could have legitimately been there. I had a lot more Bolivian forces kicking around. Now, the Bolivian effort in this war has been so iffy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just dump all these back behind the lines somewhere. And say they've been failing to put them forward. That's not going to affect play too much, but as it stood, they were overstacked. Maybe not have been able to get where they were going, although I think they probably would have from wherever they were, because the movement's fairly quick at this point, but I don't want to penalize them with a destruction. And I forgot to roll the truce for the turn, which did not happen. Not that it's a big deal if it happens or not at this point. Bolivia's got a real problem in terms of supply, but they were looking at 1-to-1 attacks with both the things they set up. This one's kind of interesting. You can see I've got a mess there. But I've got engineers there who on their next turn are going to start clearing the path there, unless I have a better attack than I think I will because of these troops coming in. Yeah, they're not going to be able to reach in time. Well, they'd be able to reach here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I doubt that they're going to launch an attack there. But I'm planning on clearing the pathway there, and that'll improve the effects of the armor, which could actually attack from here anyway. So it's that's not that important. Because, like I said at one point, it's the hex sides that are important. So an attack from here into here is considered a clear terrain hex, even if this is rough up here. Which is kind of weird. They're swinging the opinion of who has it better right now. Or maybe not so much of one. But I thought this was going to break eventually. I'm not so sure it is. Not with Bolivia not having much supply. On the Paraguayan turn, they had to split some of their forces to go back here. But I left a significant amount here. Both can cover for each other. So it's not that big a deal. But Bolivia didn't have the points to fuel their huge artillery support or barrage. There's, potential weaknesses, say, here, but that doesn't do much if I take that. This roadway's cleared up now that Bilbao's, he just lost his cav unit to attrition, so that's not going to be an opening. And basically, I'm having trouble getting a grip anywhere on the line to attack it. I can't talk with a pipe in my mouth, at least not this pipe. I did launch a 2-to-1 attack here, though, which could have succeeded. 2-to-1 gives me a 1/3 shot of pushing them out of the way. I probably won't be able to launch that again, but on the Bolivian turn, because troops could be moved. But I could, of course, move Peña or someone like him up to pin Estek, and thus keep the forces in play. I've got a large pile of forces here, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if they can break through. But the big thing was that this line held for an extra turn that I wasn't sure it could, or an extra half turn, because of the one leader being stuck there. It just looked like there were too many flaws in the line, but maybe there still are. He only has the resources to make a single attack and no artillery bombardments or anything like that. They're trying to build up a little bit of excess, but by the single attack I mean a double attack, really. 2 attacks out of this 1 hex. I had 2-to-1 odds to begin with, 3-to-1 on the second attack. Paraguay was doing bombardments out of both these hexes. These guys have to be here to pin him from doing what he did before. 3-to-1 is pretty good, given that I had the air advantage, so I was actually at a +1 between the leader, the terrain, and the air advantage. It all cancels out to a +1. 3-to-1 at +1 had more than a 50% chance of pushing them out of there. Now, how big a deal would that be? It would be a big deal, because it would open up the plains. It would open up an attack surrounding Estek's position, so he probably would abandon it. But the problem is, these guys, whoever advanced into there, would be out of supply, I believe, because I could only trace from here, and that would be 1 down, 1 to here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, my supply range is 6, so I'd be in some serious trouble in that position. But I would want to take that position, because that has the possibility of collapsing the line in either direction. Maybe both. Paraguay got lucky. I'm using this marker to indicate that I brought 1 reinforcement in. I'm only allowed twice with Paraguay. 1 reserve call up. I didn't want to do it again because I am a little worried about the victory point differential. Bolivia has pretty much all its troops. Had to take a loss here, but what they don't have is healthy troops. Paraguay has very healthy troops. You can see they have a lot of replacement points, but they're missing a decent number of their units from the board. There seems to be that kind of trade-off. When you have a lot of units on the board, you might be low on replacements and not have terribly useful units. We've seen that happen a couple of times on the different sides. Basically, the guy conducting the offensive, his army starts to wear out pretty quickly. And, well, if you don't have a lot of troops, you probably aren't in a position to conduct the offensive. And Paraguay holds out some more. As the June turn goes, Bolivia actually launched pinning it positioning all along the line so that they could get kind of some key attacks. Now, they succeeded here in destroying the unit there, but over here, Bilbao's command was forced back. And in addition to that, some of those pinning units got smacked around a little bit. Paraguay is low on supplies. Actually, both sides are very low. Paraguay is low enough that they didn't do all the artillery attacks that they have. They have less artillery than Bolivia does, but they only have 3 counters instead of 4 total. But they just haven't been able to maintain their rate of fire, and with all the conflict that's going on, there were several attacks. But nobody did more than, well, Bolivia did not use any of their second round attacks. Basically, they got chased away from the one attack they were trying to make, and then the other one was successful, and they didn't advance to try to attack this. So now Paraguay has to kind of fall back a little bit here, but otherwise their line's holding up pretty well. They have still a lot of units dead. And the Bolivian attack managed to open up room here in July for a Paraguayan counterattack, which I'd say is near perfect. They moved Ferna into place here, pinning 2 big stacks. Iraz was here. Now, there was no leader here, so this wasn't really necessary for pinning. But he's got another big stack of units here. Estig was able to hit some remainder that had been pinning him, and he gained an important hex. Now, if you see the line, at least for now, granted, there's a big defect down here in the south, which I'm trying to withdraw from a little bit and try to protect. But that's this is where the problem's going to lie, I think. But yeah, I managed to gain a hex. There was casualties. There's no question there, but 25% for Estig's force. But he got a lousy roll. But it was nearly perfectly implemented, which I haven't seen much of in my play here. It's kind of a thing of beauty when you look at, when you figure that out. But the turns take so long to try to figure out those good attacks, how to pin the enemy force down so you can get your attack. And what was part of the perfection of it was the force here was too big for these guys to attack even at 1-to-1. Because they'd been damaged already with their pinning action. So it just worked kind of neat to push forward into this hex, push forward here, and now I've got a nice front that looks pretty damn strong in the center. And the Bolivian response is kind of interesting. They swung mainly into this position, attacked, and destroyed the unit there. Now, big deal. Okay, but that gets us in a position where we can surround this space. This is an important fortress. May be necessary for Paraguay to pull out and give up a couple of towns here. Now, there aren't a lot of points available. This isn't a town. It's a fortification that would be really hard to retake. I don't think there's a town under there. No. But that would essentially probably surrender this town, although I'd have to defend this one if I fall back like that. Otherwise, I could probably throw more troops in and try to extend the line back a little bit. But I don't have a lot of extra forces, and I probably won't get much in the way of, I only get two reinforcements a turn. So I got my big unit last turn. Threw that in here. This was part of a counterattack that blasted the hell out of some Bolivian units. Attritional factors plus victory points, a couple of victory points for killing some weak units. That was cool. Over here, I tried to push my attack forward out of Boquerón, the fort that started this all, and the Bolivians managed to cleverly launch an attack from Bilbao and this hex and take that back. And that canceled out what was going to be an attack on Bilbao's own hex. Not a lot of movement going on here. The danger with this is these guys are really out of supply. They're not able to trace, so they're going to take potential attrition, but they do put a hell of a threat on this. I won't be able, if he evacuates, I'll be able to move in during my reaction move because I have leaders here. So I'll be able to get him back in supply if he evacuates. If he doesn't evacuate, well, I might be able to cut him off and actually launch a two-sided attack against these guys. Now, they have some supplies for combat, so they're not going to be weakened for the combat, and I could actually ship more in. They're not out of supply yet. Had I advanced here, they still would be able to probably trace up this way. Now, bad things happened. Paraguay lost count of how much supply they had, and they used it all up. Some of it on some artillery shelling over here. Guaranteed killing a unit if they did it, but they're out of ammo now. They're completely stripped. And now we're on the Bolivian turn. It's not like Bolivia has a whole hell of a lot, but they got a point or two squirreled away, and now they're going to get more. So they're going to be able to attack Paraguayan units at half strength. And they've broken open on their reaction move. They broke open the southern line here. So this could all just kind of collapse pretty easily. That would be problematic. Point-wise, you know, we're in close. It's 114 to 120. Right now it looks like Bolivia might just be able to pull out a victory just because, hey, we're going to get some victory points off of this turn. Mainly because I did some ill-advised artillery shelling. And Bolivia manages to clear things out here pretty easily. A lot of Paraguayan commanders pinned down there. This guy got booted because his forces were destroyed. Pretty bad. And it's looking pretty bad for Paraguay at this point. They're behind in points, 124 to 118. The game will end in about a year, assuming nothing crazy happens, like Bolivia is able to completely collapse Paraguay and get that sort of 50-point edge and a truce. I don't think that's likely to happen, but it might be worth actually surrendering at this point. I really, we'll see what the winter does, or the summer does with the rains, because that may give Paraguay some kind of edge, but it just doesn't look like it. The terrain, you know, both sides are going to suffer attrition from that if they hold this kind of line. And actually, Paraguay's line is a little worse. Bolivia can fall back without losing anything along the road here, where they'll be in fairly good shape if they do things cleverly. Whereas Paraguay has to give up their defensive border through the Chaco. And, you know, if they give that up, Bolivia can conceivably exploit it. And also, Bolivia still has a little bit more supply. They didn't burn it all. They're hoarding it more carefully, not using artillery attacks, concentrating on two key little attacks to gain territory down here. Now, on the Paraguayan turn, and I'm losing heart with them, they had to more or less abandon this position. All of Bolivia comes throwing their whole southern weight in there, which means I can't use Bilbao with his +2 bonus, and had to use Peñar because he outranks him with that 2 political command. He supersedes his command. He'll supersede the general commander as well under these circumstances. And we were unable to take the location, not because of that. I actually rolled only a 3, but I needed a 4 to roll a 4 in order for this to fall. So both sides took 25% losses, which is of course a lot heavier on the Bolivians because they have a ton of units here, and then they're going to face, they threw all their cav into here to get them to that rating. Nonetheless, though, I just do not see a way for Paraguay to launch an effective attack. Now, you know, we saw some before that were effective, but they're small scale. They're not going to be able to push the line back. So unless Bolivia makes a big mistake like they did before, I think they've got this in the bag. If it weren't my morning turn before I start working, I probably would be quitting at this point, just because it does look pretty hopeless. One thing I can say is last turn, I found an extra supply in Paraguay's troops this turn. You know, that might have made a big difference last turn, probably not, but and it's just This game is such a headache in terms of trying to balance the forces, trying to make sure you have all your supplies. It's easier using these because they stick out, and trying to then think, well, what will the enemy be able to react with? What will this? It becomes this humongous puzzle, and it's very reminiscent of Desert Fox, which is a game I very much like, but it's also kind of on a broader front. Desert Fox usually, there's just like a small choke point. Here, you're fighting over the entire front, and it just works out to be very painful, the types of maneuvers that you have to make to do this. If you like Desert Fox and wish it were handled on that same technique system were handled on a broader, on a larger scale front. Granted, this isn't as big a battlefield or an operational theater, but there ends up being more fighting or more opportunities for maneuver and fighting in this on a small scale. You're not going to see those broad movements usually. And it actually does have some of the same feel when you saw the big Paraguayan push westward, and then the fallback. That kind of reminded me of Desert Fox's feel. So if you really like that game and think you can tolerate more, this actually is an interesting look at it. It's not quite as fluid, not quite as mobile, but there's a lot of the same kind of decision making involved in it. Different system, no question, but a lot of the same kind of decision making. Okay, well, Bolivia managed to capture their main goal, which was down here. Now that opens things up. These trucks are going to have to run off map to get away. There's really no point in defending anything back here. But on Paraguay's turn, they did a counterattack against this hex. They moved out of Arca and into an attack there. And because of the way the zones of control are, they prevented a retreat and just destroyed the entire force, which got them some decent points. Not as much as this got with its 2 dice. This only got 5. I think, well, no, they actually got more. I think they got 6 points for units destroyed. Plus, they, really kind of bitch slapped the Bolivians for their situation, which is a morale boost, of course. But it's not going to change the overall flow of things. It's just, there are these little opportunities and kind of cute things to happen. Obviously, not advancing into there. That just would weaken my position. I've got to defend. I've got to figure out how to defend back here now to prevent that flank from being turned as well, the same way this one was. I'm making prodigious mistakes on both sides. But in the course of the October turn, and we've got one more turn before the bad season starts, we managed to cut out this space here. Now, what's important to us before the rains start would be to get to this hex. And here's where I made my mistake. I launched an attack on Esting's command here. Actually, I have a retreat I have to check for routes, etc. That's not a big deal. I don't mind if I lose ground there. In fact, this attack was kind of just an opportunistic bit of bullshit that I've taken too great a loss for. I took heavy losses. This is dead. The Paraguayans, though, are pretty much out of supply. They may have one left again. They're just really scraping the bottom. Bolivia's not doing too much better, but at least I think this was here. I have no idea. It looks like it now, but I bumped stuff before. The counters for this, the components really leave a lot to be desired. I'm always knocking stacks over. It's the slickery counters. They just, even though it's a matte map, they still, may not be all that matte. There's a bit of a slick to it, but they just do not stand well if you've got to have a lot flipped over or a mix of flipped and unflipped counters with decent sized stacks. It's just really a problem. I don't find this problem when you have matte counters. And there's no reason these are glossy counters except, I don't know why, except that was the style of the time. Anyway, this was kind of pointless because there's not much I could have gained if, except the victory point. Well, no. There really isn't much I could have gained. This is not a hex I terribly want it. I don't particularly want to get around on these. These guys are big fortifications. This was just a matter of, that's an unfortified hex. Let's do some attritional attacks. But this is my goal, which I probably can't take, you know, whether I did those attacks or not. And I don't know, you know. Next turn I'm going to have to set up so that the attrition doesn't hurt me too bad. You know, one of the things I can look at is Bolivia can win a minor victory by just lasting it out at this point. They have the victory point advantage. But there is this desire to do more. A certain level of defeat, which again I should just give up, has set in which Bolivia was able to push into here, destroying an attempt to hold this location. I'm sorry, this location here, fortress there. And there's a channel right up here, which is not defended. I don't know what I can do to hold it. The only thing I can hope for is that the rainy weather prevents anything from happening. But at this point, I'm at 153 to 128. It is possible, I think, that I could get, let's see what our victory conditions are here. I'm in the substantial victory, which I count as real at this point. There is some possibility of getting to the decisive Bolivian victory. And, you know, that sense of defeat is kind of making it harder for me to provide any kind of good defense with Paraguay. But you never know, the rains coming might, well, they should slow the Bolivians down a little bit. As we push into 1935, and I got three supply points to allocate to the Bolivians, nothing's happening. Everybody's just kind of digging in. You know, I just don't think much is going to happen at all because Paraguay is moving their line up to here. That fixes their defect. They've got some entrenchments going here, and then by the time, you know, just as the weather starts to clear, they're going to probably be in place for this. So they entrench again here maybe, and 3, 4, 5 to here in February. Yeah, so it's going to take a while to get there. So there's some possibility, and there's some worry here because I've got Cav and I've got Cav coming in. And Cav doesn't really operate in these two hexes very well, so I have to shift some forces around. But honestly, I think we've hit kind of the end of the game. That's not to say there's no possibility of a breakthrough or something, but I'm just not getting a lot of pleasure out of this at this point. So I'm going to call it here as a fairly minor, well, as a substantial Bolivian victory, but not a decisive one. I don't usually call games, but I'm just not getting the enjoyment out of this that I'd like to get. It looks like Bolivia and Paraguay both have supply nets built out at this point. Paraguay had a little bit of a problem because I was down here with my headquarters. I've shifted it here, which can get to here, 2, 4, 6, and then this can get to there. So I think I've got everything in supply now. I don't see much value to continuing here. It's just going to be more of the kind of blocked warfare. I don't see a possibility for Paraguay to break out the way they once did. Bolivia was taking chances on the turn at the time that Paraguay did succeed in their breakout before. At this point, yeah, you know, the lake has fallen back to Paraguay, but Bolivia has moved to Corrales. That's about the only difference up here. Down here, there's a significant chunk of Paraguayan territory that has fallen into Bolivian hands. And really, once weather clears, there would be a possibility of an offensive down against this location. But Paraguay or Bolivia could simply, move a unit there, and then it's pretty much no longer a reasonable attack route for Paraguay. And I don't know. Let's send this up.